It's time for Physician Family Finances, the show where physician moms and dads like you can get the answers and encouragement you need to turn a good earned income into great life outcomes for tomorrow and today.
Hello, physician moms and dads. I'm Nate Reineke, certified financial planner and primary advisor. Today, I'm excited to welcome Kyle Hoelzle back to the show. Kyle is one of our financial advisors here at Physician Family, specializing in retirement investing. He's also a certified financial planner. So Kyle, it's been a while since we've had you on the show, but I thought no better time because we just had Father's Day last weekend.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Father's Day was great. Hope all fathers out there had a good time and took a little time for themselves and a little time for family. So
I saw something
excited to be
funny.
here and to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something funny the other day that was like someone asked, "What do you really want on Father's Day?" And the joke was time to myself. It's like
Yeah.
when you're a devoted father, you spend a lot of time with the kids. But I'm sure most of our listeners spend time with their kids, not to themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
But it
I
is a
know
limited resource.
that's
Well, it is a
so
limited
true.
resource, time for yourself. You got to make
Yeah,
time for
so
it.
true. Well, I know you're a devoted dad and someone who really embraces fatherhood. So we wanted to have you on and talk about some parenting stuff, but also kind of parenting and money. So normally we spend, our time on the podcast answering listener questions, but I'm going to go a different route. I'm just going to ask you questions about fatherhood.
Okay. Sounds
All
good.
right?
I love this topic. So
Yeah,
there's not a lot of financial education in schools. So a lot of financial education happens in the family. So I'm really excited to talk about this today.
that's right. Okay, well, tell me about how your parents taught you about money.
Wow. Kind of two different versions, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
ironically mirrors what we were doing in my family in some ways. But my mom had to like provide for herself at an early age, so she always talked about hard work and kind of one step at a time to kind of make it through, you know, getting where you need to go financially. And my dad was like a saver, like he was more of like a um, he's a veterinarian, so he was a saver, and so he always talked to me about like hey, delayed gratitude. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a bad thing to build up that excitement to get that item you want by saving for it over time rather than financing it right away. And I think both these things served me really well in life.
Yeah,
And I'm grateful for my parents for instilling those in me.
it's interesting. I had a similar upbringing where two different households, um, and they had different outlooks on money, but one that was better with money also was kind of a risk taker. So it's a weird mixture of money teachings to me. But at the end of the day, I had to make my own choices because maybe one side wasn't great with money, one side wasn't great but had the ability to make a lot of money. So it was quite interesting. You know what? We talked about spending time to ourselves. It made me think of parenting with our physician families that we serve. Hard to teach kids about money when you don't have energy. Kind of a weird topic. Have you talked about that with clients before?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of in general about parenthood in general, it's like to do effective parenting, you need energy and you need willpower. And oftentimes those things are in low supply, especially after a long day's work or a long day taking care of things around the house and running around and getting everything done and all the scramble that ensues with kids and everything. It's really hard at that kind of late hour of the day or in that intense moment to muster up that willpower and energy.
Yeah.
So one thing I can tell listeners that's great is kids are actually pretty good communicators and they really remember things a lot. So you can always
Hmm.
say in a moment like, I don't have an answer for that right now, but I'll get back to you on that.
Hmm.
And oftentimes that'll be okay. So
Yeah.
you can always keep that in your mind. That way you don't overreact or overplay your hand or do something you regret. It's good. It's okay to
Yeah.
pause, but we always forget
I
that in the
think
moment. I feel like we got to get it done.
it's very true. And in a topic like this, some people don't feel equipped to talk about it. So
Hmm.
get out of the conversation, do some research, and come back to them, I guess. But it's funny too, the whole delayed gratification, like you're talking about. It
Hmm.
that only works if you do it yourself. Kids are sponges, and they're witnessing you do something. So anytime my oldest like wants something and he wants it right away, Um,
Mhm.
I have to explain to him, hey, like dad wants these things too, but do you see those around the house? Because he doesn't know what I'm saving for, and he's like, no, and I'm like, I don't get everything I want either. He's like, why not? Don't you have enough money for it? I'm like, some of them I do, but it's not the right time, or I need to spend money on other things. So yeah, bring them into the real world. Do you remember the first conversation? Well, tell me about your kids real quick. So how many do you have, and how old are they?
Oh yeah, I have three daughters.
Hmm.
So girl dad for life. My oldest is 9. She's into soccer, and she's an intense player. She's an athlete, definitely. My middle child is showing some athletic stuff too. She's also really into reading, um, and she's 6. And then my youngest is 3, and she just kind of, as my wife says, puts the final touches on our family. It's like the perfect
Yeah.
finish to our family because she's our sweet little angel baby, if you will. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah. So I kind of have them at all different stages right now. No teenagers.
Yeah. Okay. So do you remember the first time you talked about money at your house, maybe with your 9-year-old?
Yeah, I do. Pretty early on, kids want stuff in the checkout lines,
Hmm.
or the trip to the old Target, if you will, the
Hmm.
Target run. There's, our other stores, it's kids always, they see things, they want things. And like you said earlier, they want it right then. And so, of course, it's not your priority to buy this new toy for $50 sitting on the shelf, right? So,
Yeah.
that's when I kind of first had in conversations like kind of you did, was like roping them back into the real world and being like, look, like if dad wants something special or extra, I have to either work harder to get the money to do that, or I got to start saving a little bit here and there and build up to it. Or, there's certain ways I can do that, but like, this is for you. So you need to find ways that you can do that, and then they start thinking about like, oh, how can I reach this goal of getting this toy?
Hmm.
But you have to be, my cautionary tale is you have to be careful with money because I just kind of want to say this early because you never want to use it as like a punishment or like I hate to use this word, but like almost like a weapon with your kids. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like, you have to be careful because you wouldn't do that with anybody else really. Right. So it's kind of easy to do that when you're like, again, low willpower and you're like, so, you start talking about the money with them. So you have to kind of really make sure you keep the two separate. But yeah, in those moments when the store, it's like it's really good to talk about that real world, and it usually gets them kind of thinking, and that kind of calms them down. They can't get upset and be thinking a
Yeah.
lot, and if you can catch it in time, yeah, and so hopefully starts to save those outbreaks in the store if you're lucky.
Yeah. So you keep talking about hard work,
Hmm.
right? Like, how does
Hmm.
that go when you're teaching, your daughter's maybe 4 or 5 at the time? How do you
Hmm.
start getting them to think about hard work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like all things, I read this somewhere or heard it from a sage of some kind, that
Hmm.
told me that you got to be careful starting the money conversation too early. Like with real money, like starting the building, what you're talking about, building this understanding of work and then reward,
Hmm.
with money too early. Because when a kid's like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, it's just kind of money's like it won't mean anything to them really. You know what I mean? And so they're
Hmm.
not really quite mature enough to understand the money system yet. But you can still, so this is something I heard from somebody else, but you can still start to interpret this at an early age by like kind of like another reward system. So what my family did was we took like a clear mason jar, and we got some like glitter spray paint or whatever. You put
Hmm.
little paper stencil cutouts on. You could spray paint it fun colors, but we left like one line all the way around the jar, and that was the
Hmm.
goal line. And as your child, if say they're 4 or 5, and you want them to exhibit a certain behavior, like when you come in from school, I want you to hang up your jacket every day or your backpack or something like that. Just one little responsibility thing. They could get a chip in the jar. And then you can add on little more responsibilities, like things that they're in their world, things that are in
Hmm.
their level, hey, learn tying your shoes. Every time you try, you get a chip in the jar, and then when the jar chip hits the line, you have some pre-designed reward, like ice cream trip or trip to the park to play on the playground or whatever it is that's in your family's values or something you want to do to have fun with your child, they'd be
Hmm.
excited about. They got to be excited about it. And so that's how you
Right.
can start introducing that hard work, you get a reward. But you want them to be working on something that they should be working on. You can't have a 5-year-old out raking leaves or something.
Yeah. Right. You know what? It's funny. I probably learned this from you or something, but about I think we call it a token economy. You know, you earn a chip because they don't know what a dollar is. I'm struggling because my 7-year-old, what is actually difficult for them or like qualifies as hard work is much different than my 4-year-old. So it's like my 4-year-old has to do something, and I'm like, hey, fair is not always equal here. You gotta like go clean your bathroom, and he has to like wipe half a window. You know, it's funny, but I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
recent story. My oldest is in Spanish immersion because my wife is half Mexican, and so we want him to learn Spanish. And from picking him up from school, I know that he knows Spanish pretty well, but he never wants to speak it at home. So I was like, I have the tokens and everything. And normally it's pretty hard to get a token. I'm like, I'll give you 2 tokens every time you speak Spanish to somebody. And he's got like Spanish speakers in the house, like his grandma and everything. So he's like,
Uh-huh.
oh, and it's on. And now he's speaking Spanish all the time. It's like
Look at
overloading
that.
with tokens.
Yeah. And what you're really, if you, the real world there is like, hey, look, you're studying harder and you're learning Spanish faster and you're getting a reward out of that.
That's
Because
right.
someday he could get a job doing business, international business, and could
That's
be
right.
bilingual. So you never know,
Yeah,
you never
because
know where that's going to lead. But
he doesn't really understand why he has to learn it, you know?
yeah,
Like, and so
yeah,
you have to reward him more than just like go to school because I'm making you learn Spanish. If you want that
yeah,
behavior.
yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, and that's great, man. That's great.
Tell me about some of your family philosophies with money. So like guidelines around money, anything that you talk about at the house that has worked well with your kids or maybe even in your marriage.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I got a handful of things that come to mind. I kind of alluded to this earlier. You know, my dad's philosophy with money and my mom's philosophy with money kind of mirrors my current household. My wife's originally from Idaho, from farm country, and so
Hmm.
she was kind of raised on that hard work, honesty, grit. She calls it grit. We sum it up in the word of grit, and we say that in our household in certain situations. It's like a one word thing we say to our girls, and they're like, "Okay, I get it. This is a moment where I gotta tighten down the bootstraps," you know. So
Hmm.
that's kind of my wife's angle for hard work, and her kind of focus around money is just like she just puts her head down and works, and good things will happen, right? And I'm more of the like, hey, let's plan, let's count all the beans, let's do the
Yeah.
financial planning thing, right? And so
Hmm.
I have a much different approach to it because, and I think we bring a good balance because she reminds me that I have to live life, like
Hmm.
nothing's guaranteed. And so you can't necessarily save everything forever just for this one outcome in life in the end, because that might not happen. So I think even though we're the financial planning advising, you'd think we'd say save every dollar. I think that's not true. I think that's not sustainable in life. I think you gotta you gotta find ways to identify your values and spend money on that. I think that's the part my wife plays heavily, is she focuses on the family values and make sure that we have that family experience together,
Yeah.
because if it was me making decisions to go to Disneyland or do that, it'd be a whole other big huge thing, right? But
Yeah.
she makes it happen, and I make we all make it happen together, and it's uh so it works great. And that's kind of how my family was actually growing up. Honestly, my mom was the same way. She was like, she's like, you got to live in the now because life's not guaranteed,
That's right.
but
Yeah.
within reason, right? And that's why I think planning comes in. That's why I love financial planning, because once you identify your savings goals, and you know how much you have to do to live, and so I
That's
think
right.
that's the beauty in that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
This reminds me of I don't there's probably a term for it out there in the podcast world, but it's like mindful spending. You should
Mm-hmm.
spend money on things that are important to you. But where it gets away from people is when they start thinking that everything's important to them. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, oh, I really want this. That doesn't mean it's a value of yours. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you and I are the old car gang. Like we have old paid off cars because I just kind of don't care. Of course, I'd like a lovely, like fast car. I mean, that'd be great. But do I
Yeah.
really value that over like a family experience to Disneyland? Probably not. So I just keep driving my old car. But
Yeah.
the part that I've learned for my kids is that they immediately think just because I want something that I value it. And
Hmm.
that's really hard to teach to kids.
It
Like they
is
want it and therefore they think they value it. But taking them through that this is, and I'm, you and I before this episode started, we're like, we're not experts in this. There is no right answer to parenting. Um,
100% not a right answer.
yeah, but I think what I have tried in the past is I have explained, like recently we were at Guitar Center. I used to spend my summers sneaking into Guitar Center and playing the drum sets, before I saved up enough money to buy my own. And my oldest wanted to buy something. He like got birthday money and he wanted to spend all his money on this thing that he just found out about. He'd never heard of it before in his life, and now I
Uh-huh.
can have enough money. And I had to give him the conversation about like, do you really want this? Think about how often you would play it. And we had the whole talk. At the end, he's kind of upset and he wants to buy it anyways. I'm like, okay, you can buy it if you want. And I know what's going to happen. Obviously, he's going to run out of money. He's not going to get the next thing. But you have to let them live with the consequences and just do your best to walk them through. Like, do you actually value this thing?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you about saving. How do you explain? Actually, no, we're going to talk about this at the end. I'm going to save it, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so hard work, delayed gratification, but
Yeah.
also like a balance with living and enjoying life, because kind of, that's what money's for. Money's for security and enjoying life. Okay, let's see.
I
Do you
have a
have a
comment
chore
on
chart?
actually something.
Oh,
I have, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking about something you just said. You're talking about the values, right? And I want to bring it
Mm-hmm.
back to the children again, because I think you touched on something really important. I think we're talking about like teaching earlier. I was talking about, make sure that the chore the child's doing to get the chip or whatever is in their age band, or whatever for the appropriate for them. I think talking about values, I don't have the answer to this again, like you said, but I think I think if your values are positive and they're aligned with you as an adult and how you want your family to view life and things, I think that it's never too early to start talking about values. And
Mm-hmm.
I think having the money conversation really starts with the values. And I think you said it's hard to teach, and I agreed with you. And I was thinking, this just came to me. I've never thought about this before, but I think one of the hardest things about teaching your kids values about money is I think a lot of adults, whether we want to admit it or not, don't know our own values about money.
That's
So
right.
like you have to identify your values as a family about money before you can teach your kids values about money. But as soon as you do that, I think you can start talking about it as soon as possible. I mean, I was talking about a child in a line at 3 years old wanting a candy off of there, and you can start talking about like the values of health and the values of this and the values of that. You can start
Yeah.
throwing your values in about your family, whatever it is you want to do to try to talk them off the ledge about it. But when it and you can do the money talk on things like that as well, and you use the values around money to talk them off the ledge of something that make them
Yeah.
understand a real world. And what happens is once they understand it, it takes a little while. It's like a little sunk cost, but once they understand it, they stop asking because now they
Mm-hmm.
know the answer, right? And they don't
That's
have to
right.
ask anymore. So,
Well, it's sort of like if you don't understand your values, your child is going to figure them out without words. They're going to soak up the values that you're showing either way. So, for example, like your parents, they talked about hard work, saving, and the value that you got out of that was security. Like they value security, and whether or not you put a word to it when you were a kid or not, you took that in, and now you value security.
yeah.
If they were able to say security is important, but you also have to live life, it would have been a faster track for you. But then later on in life, you realize, I'm a security minded person. I probably got that from my dad, whether or not he wanted me to or not. And the scary thing is, if you don't identify your own values, some of those values that you don't want, like not even values, some of those habits or thoughts or whatever it may be, they're going to take on those thoughts without you trying to get them to. So
Mm-hmm.
scarcity is one that I fear in my house, because my wife grew up when she was growing up, she was very poor. And so the scarcity mindset is a scary one for me. I don't want my kids to have that, although I want them to value security. So,
Mm-hmm.
the world is your oyster. You can go out and make it what you want and go do whatever you want for work. But don't be too scared. Get out there
Mm-hmm.
and, as Kyle would say, break some eggs.
Hmm. Yep. Fail forward.
Yeah. All right. Tell me about your chore chart. Do you have one? What's your experience been with it?
Yeah, I've had a chore chart, and the chore chart's worked well. Like you kind of alluded to this earlier, that it's kind of hard to separate the age bands once you start something. So my 6-year-old
Yes.
immediately saw the effectiveness of my 9-year-old's chores ability, and to get some dollar bills, because we started
Mm-hmm.
her on $1 bills to do chores that probably took longer than a dollar's worth, but it's they need to help out around the house too. And we do have, I do want to say that we do have chores around our house. This is of my own family's values. We do have chores around our house that are not paid. It's just mandatory
Mm-hmm.
family, and I relay that back to whichever appeals to the child the most. Right now, my oldest, team sports, so I tell her like, family's a team. It's no different than a team. We all have to pull our weight on this team.
Mm-hmm.
Teamwork makes the dream work, that type of stuff, and that resonates with her. But yeah, we do have chores offline. But I was a little skeptical about the chore chart because, first of all, you have to go to the bank and get a whole bunch of $1 bills. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of keep a stash of ones all the time, and so it's
Yeah.
like you're going to the bank to get ones. No, but yeah, no, it's actually been really liberating. Like once no, it was messy at first, like all innovation or all new things. It was messy. Okay, like, again, I
Mm-hmm.
failed forward on this one hard. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because I made some of the cardinal mistakes you shouldn't make in my low moments, around the chore chart, and I just realized, I didn't feel good, and so I just, you tighten it up. You just, the next day is a new day. You're going to make it better, and that's what we've done. And I think it's really resonating now. My third child is going to be the luckiest one, because she's going to show up to a fully polished chore chart, and have dad running it
Yeah.
effectively. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, the liberation though came with my 9-year-old, because she's like high energy, likes to live life, so she likes to spend money. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting, and so it's like we're talking about, and basically I'm just talking about values with her. But the part that was liberating is like, we don't talk about buying toys that are not Christmas, birthday, or any other sort of like holiday thing, or gifts from grandma, right? Like anything beyond those moments, she wants a toy or something extra special. She doesn't ask me for it anymore, because she knows the more chores she does around the house and the property, then the more money she earns, and then she can buy something. And so it started out kind of rocky at first, like still trying to ask me to buy stuff, and I just kept falling back on the chore chart. I'm like, well, go home and do more chores and come back and buy this later. Save up your
Yeah.
money. Start saving. And even though the reward to us seems really like, you're going to buy this piece of plastic or whatever, for 30, 40, $50, I would never do that.
Yeah.
Well, you're not technically doing that. They've earned that now. You know what I mean? And you're getting
Mm-hmm.
something out of that. Your child's learning, oh, if I work hard, the more I work, the more money I get, or the harder I work, the more money I get. Sometimes I give her like jobs outside the chore chart, like, oh, if you want to vacuum the whole car, like, you can do that. And she's like, well, how much are you going to pay me? And we start like negotiating about money a
Yeah.
little bit. It's kind of fun, And I'm like, well, what do
Yeah.
you think the job's worth? She goes, oh, I don't know. And she sort of throws out a number, and it's like really high, And I'm like, oh no, I
Yeah.
don't think so. I think I'd pay some kid this much to do it, if they did a really good job. And so, anyways, it's fun. And then so she'll work extra hard because she has something in mind, what it is. But yeah, I don't have the tantrum, the fight in the store anymore ever again. We never even talk about it. She goes to the
Yeah.
store, she shops, she'll window shop, and then we just walk away. No conversation.
Yeah. What I've found interesting is, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have this too. It's kind of hard to, like you said, they don't ask anymore. Well, I think a lot of our listeners, a lot of physicians that I've spoken to, they grew up and their parents didn't have any money. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's almost like a gift to themselves that they can treat their child.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
the real gift is giving your child the skill. That's the real
Mm-hmm.
gift. It's not that you
Mm-hmm.
have money so you can buy them whatever they want. It's that you don't want to raise a spoiled, rotten child. And
Mm-hmm.
raising that child, that's the gift. It's not spoiling them. Even though sometimes you can, I guess. I like to spoil them with like ice cream or something, so it's not like staring me in the face every time I walk in their room how spoiled they are. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's more difficult, but it's a long-term game because it becomes much less. It's more difficult to have them do chores, but in the long run, like you've said, it's liberating because then you no longer have to deal with tantrums. So you both get
Mm-hmm.
something out of it. I love that answer.
Yeah. 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 It's been
Okay,
good. And yeah. So go ahead.
yeah, I wanted to know, do you have a piece of advice that you'd give a new physician dad about money and parenting?
Hmm. Well, I had one answer and then I just thought of another answer, and um, I'm not sure which one to roll with, but this one that just popped in my head. I'm just going to go with it. But I had this. I was talking to my wife, and when you say something or do something with a child, they remember it, and then they'll like bring it back up. They'll be like, "Yeah, but that one time." Yeah, but with that one time. And so I was telling my wife, I was like, we're like the judicial system, the legislative system, and the executive system. Okay, whatever we say, like goes. Okay, and then we set
Yeah.
precedent, and then people will come and argue with you over this precedent. Oh, but you remember this date and this date and this date when you allowed this.
Uh-huh.
Right now, you have to allow it today. You set this precedent. You know what I mean? So I think I think identifying your values early and starting to talk about that and starting to set boundaries around money that are healthy, that apply to the real world, like relating the chore chart appropriately to the real world, starting at the appropriate ages, whatever you feel is comfortable. Just things like that. Just remember you're setting precedent. You can back things up, of course, you're the adult, you can back things up, but once you keep going, like you said, like the habit, the habitualness of it keeps going.
Hmm.
I'll buy it every time. I'll buy it every time. Unfortunately, the result is like you don't want your children to go out there to think that someone's just going to keep providing for me all the time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like we you want to most we want to launch our kids. I mean, as hard as it is to have them not need us anymore, I think at the end of the day we want to launch our kids out of the nest, and um, I think that's really what's super important about that. So just remember what you're doing, and be really conscious of what you're doing, because you are setting like precedent for potentially the rest of your child's life.
That's right.
But again, every child's different. Every child's, I talk a lot about my oldest. I do want to end with my middle child. I'm so proud of her. She said, "Dad, I'm going to try to save $100." And I said, "All right, let's do it." And she's been saving and spending at the same time, and she's making her way there. So I'm like super proud of her. So every child's different, and it's just been
Yeah.
really a joy to talk about this.
Yeah, that's a really good answer because you set precedent with everything, right? And what's interesting is there's some things at our house that we've allowed when our children were younger and they weren't, let's say, I don't know, didn't have they could put it down easily, like, oh, let's watch a movie. And then once they get older, it's like, well, I want to watch a movie every day. But when they're younger, they're like half watching the movie, half playing, and it felt totally harmless. But
Mm-hmm.
now we've learned with our younger ones, it's you set precedent early because you don't want to have to pull something away from them.
Mm-hmm.
So even with
Yeah.
things like other parenting, but like money is a big one. So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's great. Setting precedent, remember. Okay, I want to end with something kind of fun. Okay.
Okay.
I'm calling this Teach Me Like I'm Five. Okay, so there's some
Okay.
financial things
Yeah.
and in our world, and trying to explain this to my kids has been interesting. I notice like when you have certain words in our world that you'll use to describe something, and then when you're talking to your kids, you realize they have no idea what that means. In fact, I can't even explain that word like to a 5-year old. Like, so I want to teach people how, so maybe give them some words to talk about some important money things. So let's start with credit or debt.
Hmm.
How would you teach a
Credit or
5-year
debt?
old about credit or debt?
Um, wow. This is fun. Um, so credit, I think I'm going to talk about, I guess debt. Debt's the easier one to talk about, I would
Hmm.
say maybe. So debt would be like, um, so you want this toy right here, but you don't have the money. You want to buy it, but there's no money. And so someone else has the money and they'll give it to you, but you have to pay it back plus even more money depending on how long it takes you to pay it back. And if you don't pay it back, then uh, you still owe the money, and other things can happen with you that's not good.
Hmm.
And so you want to always make sure to pay your debts. So if you do borrow money, which you got to be very careful to do, and take on debt, but so I don't know. I mean, this is hard. It's really hard. This is a
Yeah,
really
yeah,
hard
yeah.
thing to say. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
tough.
would I would say something similar, and then it would be like, and remember, while you're paying it back, you're not able to save for other things you might want later.
That's nice. Yeah.
That one was hard because it's like
Mm,
and because they do know what this looks like. They're like, well, you have money and I'll give it back to you. I get that one at the
mm,
store. I'm like, yeah, right, dude. I'm
yeah.
not giving you
Well,
any money.
actually, I've done that with my 9-year-old. She's been like, "Oh, I'm short, Dad. Will you pay me back, and then I can work on the chore chart?" You know what I mean? And I'm like, "Oh, this is a debt conversation. Okay." And
Yes,
so, and she's a little older, so she kind of can understand a little bit more, those terms and things.
right.
5-year-old's difficult. Yeah.
Okay, I think you're gonna nail this one. Okay, I got
Okay.
two more.
Okay.
Investing.
Investing. Okay. Um, so investing is when you take money that you've earned and you uh, you purchase an investment, and I guess you describe an investment as there's a whole variety of investments out there, but what you're trying to get out of an investment is because you're purchasing something that's going to produce a benefit, a money benefit to you. So you put money in the hopes that you're going to get more money back. And it sounds
Mm,
too good to be true, right?
yeah.
But here's the thing: the amount of money you get back will depend on how much risk you take, and risky, risky like you climb something and you're really high up. It's really risky that you might fall and get hurt. It's kind of dangerous. So these investments have a riskiness. And the higher you climb and the more risky you get, then the more potential money you get. But that risk, if you do fall, means you could lose all the money you put in or some of the money you put in. And it might not be
Mm-hmm.
a good investment. You could lose money on that investment. So you have to be careful. You have to always know what you're investing in. But
Mm-hmm.
a well-chosen investment can be really good for you if
There you go.
done appropriately. Yeah.
Okay, I heard it's like planting a seed, and sometimes a tree grows and sometimes it doesn't.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that, the money seed.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Okay.
That's really short and sweet.
So we were talking before this episode, and actually, I don't know if we were preparing for this, but I was trying to explain to my 6-year-old about saving money. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you've talked a lot about that, but a 6 year, or sorry, 7 now, he just turned 7. Um, they have no concept of saving. They're like, I'm saving for, I want this one thing. Like, why can't I just
Mm-hmm.
buy this, blow all my money on this one thing? So,
Mm-hmm.
explain saving or versus spending to a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm gonna go with my 6-year-old because she's piggybacking my 9-year-old right now, and so this is actually happening in my household right now. And she, it started out in the early conversation. I guess it started with her when she was 5. Yeah. So when she was 5, it would start out with the store conversations again. I just used that opportunity moment, and she wanted to buy something. I said, well, this is why we need to save money so that when an opportunity comes up, or maybe even as adults, sometimes things come up that's not a good thing. It's just you need to have money for emergencies or something. But that's why we should always have some money saved or be saving money, because we need to be prepared for the future, because we don't know what the future is going to hold. You didn't know you wanted this item until right now, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't have any money saved. And I don't have any money saved for this. And so you just kind of start talking about saving money. And then that way when they go to the store, they go, I don't have enough for this. I better start saving some money.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get more money? I better start doing chores around the house because Dad will give me $1.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
at
You,
some point you wean
you
them off the chore chart and they're just doing chores around the house. So,
That's right. You were telling
yeah.
me, I think you gave like a carnival example. It's like, what if something really fun happens and you
Mm-hmm.
don't have any money to take advantage of it? I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's so good. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
so
And we,
when I first started talking about money with my kids, it was I definitely broke some eggs. I mean, like it was not perfect. And because I think you get excited about something as a parent, you want to teach your kids, and then you want to go upstairs and you know, tell them everything about it as if they're interested. But really, what I keep hearing you say is you're taking opportunities in real life and you're taking a moment, even though you're probably busy and rushed, and explaining to them uh, in real time how this works, how money
yeah.
works. And they can always call back to that. Like I have
Mm-hmm.
plenty of stories about at the store when like I don't want to be sitting there in the toy aisle talking about whether or not they can or can't buy this toy I don't think that they need. But that is the opportunity that they're listening because they actually want
Yeah.
something.
Right. And I just remembered something powerful my mom said to me, and she's kind of a sage herself, and her hard-won battles in life. And she told me one thing about parenting she learned was, you need to go into their world. You live in the
Mm-hmm.
adult world, and you're not going to get any traction trying to get them to learn something or do something in the adult world. It's too much for them to understand. They're not there yet, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
you can find ways to have these conversations in their world, then they're going to be invested in that process. They're going to be listening. They're going to care, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here's a perfect example how you can bring the two together. I was just thinking about this, saving for Disneyland. My kids would be like, "Oh, we want to go to the water park and blah blah blah," and you're like, Dad's thinking like, "Oh, water park, that's $100 in gas. The ticket
Yeah.
entrances are $200. Food there's another 200. It's like easily a $600, $700, $800 day." And you're like, that would go a long way towards going to Disneyland. So then you would say to the kids, well, we could do that, but then I don't know when we're going to have to save longer for Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And that's bringing like the whole global family's finances in. But again, I went into their world. They kind of brought me in, and I kind of
Mm-hmm.
use it like, well, here's the real world. And I think don't be afraid to expose the real world to your kids in a way that doesn't, you got to make sure not to, you want to still not let them grow up too fast. You still want them to have their childhood. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, that's what I mean. You got to step into their world at their level. And again,
Right.
it's not easy to do. It's a subtle art, but it's more opportunistic. It's really actually a lot more opportunistic than I care to admit, because I'm
Yeah.
not much of an
Oh,
opportunistic
yeah.
kind of guy. I'm not
Definitely.
wired that way. But you have to be.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to end us on that. Um, if you're interested in becoming a client and you'd like to chat with us, and you can go to our website, go to physicianfamily.com, click the Get Started button. You'll take a short quiz to see if we are compatible with each other. And if we are, you can schedule an interview with us. But if you are not ready for that yet, you can send us a question. We might feature it on the show. You can email us at podcast@physicianfamily.com. And if neither of those are your flavor, please, you can go rate our show. That would really mean a lot to us, and help us get the word out to other physicians that might find the podcast valuable. Until next time, remember, you're not just making a living, you're making a life.
Are you ready to turn worries about taxes and investing into all the money you need for college and retirement? It's time to make a plan and get on track. To find out if we're a match, visit physicianfamily.com and click Get Started. Or you can ask a question of your own by emailing podcast@physicianfamily.com. See marketing disclosure at physicianfamily.com/disclosures.